My wife Kath and the kids brought these chicks home a few weeks ago. They're growing fast, they need a home, so in this video I'm going to start making a chicken coop. I'm making the frame from treated pine studs, but before I get started framing, I'll take the time to put a coat of paint on. I've got them leaning against the wall with the sun on them to dry out. They're not wet through, but they are a bit damp on the surface. I'll build the 4 walls in my workshop and then I'll screw them together later on in position. To make room, I've pushed a few things around and I'm moving this workbench next door, and that gives me just enough room to build the biggest wall. I'm building the walls on the floor and that will ensure that they're flat and they're all in line. I took the time to make plans in SketchUp, so now I can get started. This is the bottom plate, and I should say before I get started that this wouldn't be exactly the correct way to build a structure, but it's only a chicken coop and it will be plenty strong enough. I actually stopped there and I decided to paint an extra coat now on all the studs, and I also decided to change the colour to a lighter shade. Now back to the build. I'm putting together the top plate, which is made up of 2 lengths stacked on top of each other, and the reason for that is the roof will hang over the end of the walls and this will give it more support. I didn't have studs long enough, so I'm piecing it together and I'm staggering the joints. I intended to place the joints where the uprights will sit, but as you'll see I didn't get that quite right, but it really wasn't too crucial. I'm attaching the 2 outside uprights to the top plate with 1 nail before checking that the frame is square. This one was dead on, but the next wall wasn't, and it just needed adjusting by tapping 1 corner with a mallet until it was square. I then put more nails in to lock the frame together. My timber is 35mm thick, so 2 of them together is 70mm. My nails are 75, so that's why I'm putting them in on an angle. It worked out perfectly without a single one coming through the other side. Because I'm putting the nails in on an angle, the heads are sticking out slightly proud, but easy enough to hit flush with a hammer. That's one of the main walls done. Now I'm making an end wall and I'll speed through that process. I decided to screw together the 2 lengths of the top plate. If I'd have used 2 full lengths, then I wouldn't have needed to do this. I used 100mm batten screws that I already had, and because the studs are 90mm, I had to first drill a recess for the head of the screw to sink below the surface. We had a chicken coop years ago in the garden. That was already there when we bought the place. We ended up knocking it down and planned to build a new one. That was 7 years ago. Where I'm whippersnippering, there's a concrete base that I put in at the time, but the project never got any further until now. The frames were pretty heavy, so I got some help from a mate to get them from the workshop and into the paddock, and also we got the boys to help out too. I didn't plan on screwing them together that day as it was almost dark, but while my mate Jeff was there, I made the most of the help. I wasn't 100% confident that all the pieces would fit together properly, but I was very happy that they did. I just secured it with a few screws. They really weren't quite long enough, but I bought some more the next day. I replaced those and then I put more in as well. Because it was a rush to get it together before it went dark, I didn't get any footage of the concrete base, but you can see the corner of it here with the frame sitting on it. One thing I didn't get quite right was the top diagonal of the end walls. The one end was too high and should have been flush with the top of the main wall. It was my fault as I didn't follow my own plans correctly. I lined that up to the inside top corner of the upright. I should have lined it up with the back corner and then chopped off the top of the upright. I prized it off, made adjustments and refitted it, and to do that I put a temporary stud across the top where the rafters will sit, and I clamped the top diagonal to it to get it in just the right position, and then I fixed it in place. Even though I cut the top off the upright, it could have stayed there because it wasn't actually in the way. I need to fix a frame to the concrete base. I wouldn't want the wind to come through and lift the whole thing off the ground, so to fix it I'm using Tapcon screws and they go directly into the concrete. Now the frame's up, I've taken a good look at it and I've decided the overhang was a bit too long, so I'm cutting a couple of inches off either end. Next I'm ready to start the roof, and the first job is to cut all the rafters to length. To fix the rafters, I'm using these universal triple grips. I could have toe-nailed them to the top plate, but these will work well too, and I already have a bunch of them. Even though it isn't necessary, I'm snipping off the one corner as it isn't really needed. The triple grips work well because they're fixed on 3 different faces, and I did add more nails later on. I'm filling in between the rafters. That will add a bit more strength to them, but I'm mainly doing it to close up the gaps to keep out any critters. I start by fitting every other one and nailing through the rafter into the ends, and then I fit the rest by nailing them from an angle. I'm chamfering the end of the rafters just to tidy them up a bit, and I'm using my homemade spoke shave, which did a fantastic job. Before I put on any battens or roofing, I'm fixing down plywood. It'll give the structure more strength and it'll stop it from twisting. But the main reason is to close in the gaps and again to keep out any predators. I didn't space the rafters correctly for the plywood to fit them. I knew this, but I wanted the rafters spaced evenly across the whole coop, apart from the two end ones, which are a little bit closer together for the soffit. But I decided to go ahead with it as it is and then just deal with it. I could have cut the plywood to fit, but I would have needed more of it, and once the battens are installed across the roof, I'll fix the unsupported edges of the plywood to those. Even though the plywood is preventing the structure from twisting, the coop can still rack from side to side. I'm hoping when I build the hen house at the one end that will prevent that. If not, then I can add a few diagonal braces. This circular saw is the only one I own, and it's a bit overkill for this, but I have just ordered a cordless combi kit with a circular saw in it, and some of those tools would have been very handy on this job, and I'm pretty excited to be getting them. I'm using these ceiling battens because I already have them. They're not the correct thing to use as a roof batten because they wouldn't be as strong, but they're plenty strong enough for a chicken coop. Now I'm fixing the edges of the plywood that I mentioned earlier. I'm drilling from the top so I can see where to put the screws from the underneath. I pulled out this old roofing tin. I've been storing it outside and it's got in pretty bad condition, so I decided to head to my local salvage yard and pick up some better sheets there. I fixed the tin across the lowest batten first before climbing up onto the roof and fixing the rest. The roofing screws I'm using are 45mm and just long enough to go through the roof and the batten, but not through the plywood. I also picked up some flashing from the salvage yard to tidy up the two ends of the roof. I wasn't sure exactly where to cut the flashing off, but I think that looks okay. While I was painting the flashings, I also ran the roller along the bare edge of the corrugated iron to stop it from rusting. I'm still making my mind up whether to add a fascia board or not, but I'll have a think about that. And for now, I'm going to end the first part of the video here. Don't forget to check back for the second part, where I'll build the hen house, nesting boxes, a door, some feeders, a gutter, and install the mesh. There's still plenty to do, and that's why I split the video into two parts. Hopefully you enjoyed this part. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.